I could ignore Rachel's weird requests. I could overlook her obsession with acoustic tests. But when I found military GPS transponders hidden inside 12 marble sculptures, I torched her entire operation. The morning light cut through the workshop windows like a blade, casting sharp shadows across the Carrara marble sculptures lined up on my workbench. I ran my fingers along the pristine surface of the first piece, feeling the cool smoothness that only centuries of geological pressure could create. The veining patterns told stories older than civilization itself, blues and grays swirling through white like frozen rivers. Beautiful work, I murmured to Tommy, who was setting up my acoustic testing equipment nearby. My nephew had good hands for the trade, steady and patient. At 19, he already understood stone better than masons twice his age. The familiar weight of responsibility settled on my shoulders. 9 years at Heritage Stoneworks had taught me that reputation rode on every single restoration. These pieces would be displayed in Whitmore Gallery's new wing, where the city's elite would judge my craftsmanship. No pressure there. "Uncle Buck, this marble feels different," Tommy said, his palm pressed against the sculpture's base. The kid had developed a sensitivity to stone texture that impressed even the old-timers. I nodded approvingly. "What kind of different?" "Heavier than it should be, and the temperature's off." He frowned, running his thumb along an edge. "Like there's something dense inside." Diana's voice carried from the office, discussing invoicing with someone on the phone. 20 years of marriage, and I still found comfort in the rhythm of her business calls. She kept Heritage Stoneworks running while I focused on the craft. I picked up my brass testing hammer, the same one my mentor had given me 30 years ago. The weight felt perfect in my hand, balanced like a good chisel. I tapped the marble gently, listening for the clear ring that meant solid stone. Instead, I heard something else entirely. The sound came back hollow in 3 distinct spots, like knocking on a wooden door instead of striking marble. I tapped again, harder this time. Same result. "That can't be right," I muttered, setting down the hammer. My stomach tightened with the first whisper of unease. Tommy looked up from positioning the ultrasonic density scanner. "What's wrong? Help me with this." I guided the scanner's probe against the sculpture's surface, watching the digital readout. The numbers made no sense. Where I expected uniform density readings around 2.7 grams per cubic centimeter, standard for Carrara marble, the display showed wild fluctuations. Hollow pockets where solid stone should be. I recalibrated the equipment twice. Same results. "This is a $2.3 million donation," I said, more to myself than Tommy. "Museum-quality pieces." But my professional eye was detecting amateur work, internal flaws that would make these sculptures unstable. If one of these pieces failed during installation, the morning's confidence evaporated like steam off hot coffee. Tommy watched me work, sensing the shift in mood. Could be natural inclusions, right? Air pockets from when the marble formed? I shook my head. Not in these patterns. I tapped the marble again with the hammer, mapping the hollow sounds. Natural inclusions are random. These are organized. The workshop suddenly felt too quiet, too isolated. Dust motes danced in the afternoon light, but the familiar comfort of my workspace had turned cold. "Tommy, bring the portable X-ray unit." My nephew's eyes widened. "We only used the X-ray for serious structural analysis, when we needed to see inside stone without damaging it." He wheeled the compact unit over, its lead-lined housing heavy on the cart. I positioned the X-ray head against the first sculpture and activated the system. The machine hummed quietly as it penetrated the marble, creating images of the internal structure. What I saw on the monitor made my coffee go cold in my hand. Dark voids showed clearly within the marble matrix, perfectly geometric rectangles that nature never creates. Not random air pockets or mineral inclusions. These cavities had been carved deliberately, then sealed so expertly that only advanced imaging could detect them. "These aren't natural," I told Tommy, pointing at the rectangular shadows on the screen. "Someone cut these spaces into the stone before finishing the surface." My nephew leaned closer, studying the images. His face went pale as understanding dawned. "You mean someone hid something inside?" I nodded grimly. 30 years of working with stone, and I'd never seen anything like this. The craftsmanship was extraordinary. Whoever had done this possessed master-level skills. But why hollow out priceless marble to create secret compartments? My mind raced through possibilities. Smuggling was the obvious answer. But what needed this level of sophisticated concealment? Drugs? Money? Something worse? The prestigious gallery project had just transformed into something sinister. Diana appeared in the workshop doorway, her bookkeeper's intuition alert to trouble. "Everything okay in here? You both look like you've seen a ghost." I gestured at the X-ray monitor. "Take a look at this." She studied the images, her business mind immediately grasping the implications. "Buck, if there's something illegal hidden in these sculptures..." "I know." The words came out heavier than I intended. Heritage Stoneworks couldn't afford to be connected to anything questionable. Our reputation was everything in this business. The workshop door chimed as Frank Castellano arrived for our weekly chess game. The retired electronics engineer took one look at our faces and knew something was wrong. "What's got everyone looking like pallbearers?" Frank asked, setting down his chess set. I showed him the X-ray images. Frank's sharp eyes, trained by decades of circuit design, immediately focused on the geometric patterns inside the marble. "Those look like equipment housings," he said after a long moment. His voice carried the certainty of professional experience. "Equipment?" Tommy asked. Frank pointed at the rectangular voids. "See how precisely they're shaped? And the way they're positioned? Someone designed these cavities to hold specific devices." My stomach dropped another notch. "What kind of devices?" "Hard to say without more data, but whatever's in there, it's sophisticated. This isn't amateur hour." The two of us exchanged worried glances. Frank had worked on classified military projects before retirement. If he was concerned, I should be terrified. The workshop's familiar comfort dissolved completely. These weren't just flawed sculptures anymore. They were something else entirely. Something that could destroy everything I'd built. I looked at the remaining sculptures lined up on my bench, each one potentially hiding the same secrets. The afternoon light that had seemed so promising this morning now felt harsh and exposing. "Frank," I said quietly, "I think I'm going to need your help figuring out what we're dealing with here." Frank's weathered fingers moved across his frequency detector with practiced precision. The device looked ancient compared to modern smartphones, but I'd seen him use it to troubleshoot everything from garage door openers to radio interference. He connected the probe to a small antenna and powered it up. "Let's see what these beauties are really hiding," he muttered, adjusting the sensitivity controls. The detector came alive immediately. A steady beeping filled the workshop. Not the random static you'd expect from background interference, but something rhythmic, deliberate. 915 megahertz, Frank read from the display, his voice dropping to barely above a whisper. "That's not possible." I leaned over his shoulder, watching the signal strength meter spike with each pulse. "What's 915 megahertz? Frank's face had gone pale. 20 years of military electronics work, and I'd never seen him look this shaken. "That's military frequency band, Buck. Restricted spectrum." Tommy stepped back from the sculptures like they'd suddenly caught fire. Smart kid. He could sense when adults were scared, even if he didn't understand why. The beeping continued, steady as a heartbeat. Every 37 seconds, the signal spiked across all three sculptures simultaneously. Whatever was inside them wasn't just sitting dormant, it was actively transmitting. "Frank," I said quietly, "are you telling me these sculptures are broadcasting?" He nodded, his engineer's mind already working through the implications. "GPS transponders, military grade from the frequency signature. Someone embedded active surveillance equipment in priceless marble." The workshop suddenly felt exposed, like we were performing on a stage for an invisible audience. Every conversation, every client meeting, every private moment in my sanctuary. Had someone been listening? "We need to document this," Frank said, connecting his laptop to the spectrum analyzer. "This is serious federal crime territory." I watched the scrolling data on his screen, lines of code that meant nothing to me but everything to Frank. The familiar sounds of my workshop, the distant hum of the dust collector, Tommy organizing tools, felt surreal against this electronic revelation. "How long do you think they've been active?" I asked. Frank studied the transmission patterns. "Based on signal strength and consistency, these have been broadcasting for months, maybe years." Professional installation, professional equipment. My hands trembled slightly as I reached for my phone. Heritage Stoneworks couldn't survive being connected to federal surveillance crimes. Our insurance would drop us. The state licensing board would investigate. Decades of reputation building destroyed. Diana appeared in the doorway with her afternoon tea service, immediately sensing the tension. She'd been managing our books for 15 years. She could read trouble in our faces better than any financial statement. "What's wrong?" she asked, setting down the tray. I gestured at Frank's equipment. "The sculptures aren't just hollow. They're transmitting radio signals." Her bookkeeper's mind cut straight to the practical implications. "Buck, if there's illegal surveillance equipment in our workshop," I know, the words felt heavy as granite blocks, "we could be liable for unknowing participation." Diana studied the frequency readings over Frank's shoulder. "We have to report this immediately. The longer we wait, the worse it looks." She was right, of course, but reporting meant losing the gallery contract. Probably losing other clients too, once word spread that Heritage Stoneworks had been compromised. The restoration business ran on trust and reputation. Frank's laptop chimed with each transmission burst. "Whoever did this has serious resources," he said. "This equipment costs thousands per unit. The installation alone would require master-level stone carving skills." The irony wasn't lost on me. Someone had used my own expertise, the precision stonework I took pride in, to create a surveillance network. They'd turned craftsmanship into conspiracy. Tommy finished organizing the hand tools, his young face serious with the weight of adult problems he couldn't fully understand. "Uncle Buck, are we in trouble?" "Not if we handle this right," I said, hoping I sounded more confident than I felt. As evening light filtered through the workshop's high windows, I made copies of all our documentation, while Frank backed up the electronic evidence. The sculptures sat like malevolent sentinels, their beautiful facades hiding technological secrets that could destroy us. I called Elena Vasquez, the investigative journalist who'd exposed the chemical plant cover-up last year. Her voicemail picked up after 3 rings. "Elena, it's Buck Reed from Heritage Stoneworks. I've discovered some irregularities in donated artwork that might interest you. Call me back when you get this." Frank continued monitoring the transmissions, creating an electronic paper trail. "The signals are coordinated," he said. "These aren't independent devices. They're part of a network." Diana calculated potential losses on her tablet, while I contemplated the ethical implications. The 3 generations of our family business, me, Diana, and Tommy, understood that tomorrow would bring consequences we couldn't predict. The workshop settled into uneasy quiet as darkness fell outside, but the sculptures continued their invisible broadcasts, pulsing electronic secrets into the night air. My phone buzzed with Elena's return call around 9 p.m. "Buck, you mentioned irregularities in artwork? Elena, I need you to come see something, but not over the phone." Her journalist instincts engaged immediately. "How serious are we talking?" I stared at the sculptures, their marble surfaces innocent in the workshop's overhead lighting. "Federal crime serious." Late that evening, I reviewed Frank's frequency analysis one final time. The GPS transponders were definitely military-grade surveillance equipment, embedded with surgical precision in priceless marble. Someone with significant resources and technical expertise had orchestrated this operation. The realization crystallized like setting mortar. Exposing this conspiracy would likely destroy my comfortable life, but preserve my integrity. The decision weighed heavy as electronic pulses continued emanating from within the ancient stone. High-frequency scanning revealed electronic pulse signatures within the supposedly solid stone structures. The drill bit caught against something that wasn't marble. I stopped, feeling the resistance through 30 years of muscle memory. Stone doesn't lie. It tells you exactly what's inside, but this was telling me something I didn't want to hear. I backed the bit out half a turn and adjusted the torque. The precision diamond tip cost me $400, but right now, it was worth every penny. Frank's frequency readings showed the strongest signal 3 inches deep, right where my bit was meeting resistance. The workshop's dust collector hummed steadily, catching particles fine as flour. "Easy does it," I muttered, applying pressure with the patience my old mentor taught me. The marble gave way suddenly, and I felt the bit punch through into empty space. My hands stayed steady as I withdrew the drill, but my stomach dropped. 30 years of restoration work, and I'd never drilled into anything that wasn't supposed to be there. The cavity was perfectly round, machined with precision that matched my own standards. I reached for my extraction tools, thin steel probes I normally use for removing damaged dowel pins. The first probe slid into the hole and immediately struck metal. Not iron, not bronze, something harder, denser. "Come on," I whispered, working the probe deeper. "What are you?" The device came out attached to my magnetic retrieval tool. Silver dollar size, maybe a quarter-inch thick. Military-grade titanium housing with microscopic etchings along the edges. I set it on my workbench under the magnifying lamp and felt my chest tighten. This wasn't some amateur electronics project. The construction quality matched surgical instruments. Precise, expensive, built to last decades. Serial numbers etched so small I needed my jeweler's loupe to read them. GPS antenna leads thinner than human hair, but perfectly routed through titanium channels. I picked up my phone and called Frank. "You need to see this, now." 20 minutes later, Frank's pickup crunched across the gravel lot. He walked in carrying his old Navy electronics kit, the same battered case he'd used for 40 years of troubleshooting. "Jesus, Buck." He adjusted his reading glasses and bent over the device. "This is military spec. Haven't seen construction like this since my destroyer days. What's it worth?" "The hardware? Maybe $3,000 each. But the engineering," he shook his head. "Someone spent serious money developing this. Custom battery technology, frequency hopping capability, probably designed for 20-year operation cycles." I felt the weight of it settling on my shoulders. Someone had invested hundreds of thousands of dollars in this surveillance network. They'd hired master stone carvers to embed the devices without detection. They'd planned this operation for years, maybe decades. "We need to check the other two sculptures," I said. The second extraction went smoother. My technique improved with practice, and the marble surrendered its secret to patient craftsmanship. This transponder showed recent activity, tiny LED indicators glowing faint green under the workshop's fluorescent lights. Frank photographed everything with my digital camera while I documented the extraction in my restoration log. The familiar rhythm of careful work helped steady my nerves, but tension coiled in my shoulders like steel cable under load. 23 sculptures donated over 12 years, I calculated aloud, cross-referencing Rachel Torres' donation records. If each one contains surveillance equipment, that's a $70,000 hardware investment, Frank finished. Plus development costs, installation, monitoring. We're talking serious resources. The third sculpture fought me. The marble was harder, older, with veins that ran against the grain. I had to approach the cavity from a different angle, drilling parallel to the natural faults to avoid cracking the piece. My diamond bit finally broke through, and I extracted the largest device yet. This one included additional circuitry, probably a relay transmitter to boost signals from the other units. I sealed all 3 transponders in evidence bags, labeling each with extraction location and timestamps. My hands moved through the familiar motions of documentation, but my mind raced ahead to consequences. Whoever installed this surveillance network wouldn't appreciate being exposed. Through the workshop window, I spotted a black Mercedes pulling into the parking lot. My stomach clenched as I recognized the license plate, Rachel Torres, arriving for her scheduled check-in. I quickly slid the evidence bags into my tool cabinet's locked drawer and closed my restoration log. The workshop suddenly felt too small, the air too thick with stone dust and implications. Rachel's heels clicked across the concrete as she approached. I grabbed a shop rag and wiped marble dust from my hands, buying time to compose my expression. "Mr. Reed," she called through the open bay door, "I hope I'm not interrupting." She stepped into the workshop wearing an elegant wool coat that probably cost more than my monthly salary. Her perfume mixed with the familiar sense of stone dust and machine oil, creating an atmosphere that felt charged with tension. "Just finishing up some detail work," I said, gesturing toward the sculptures. "Making good progress." Her eyes scanned the workspace with casual interest, but I caught something calculating in her gaze, like she was cataloging every tool, every surface, every detail. "I wanted to personally thank you for taking such care with these pieces. They mean a great deal to our foundation." I forced a professional smile and nodded toward the sculptures. "These pieces have been educational to work with. Rachel moved closer to examine my restoration work, her heels clicking against the concrete floor. Her fingers traced along the marble surface where I'd extracted the first transponder, following the barely visible seam where I'd filled and polished the cavity. "You've repaired some damage in the stone," she observed, her voice carrying casual interest that didn't match the intensity in her eyes. My throat tightened. The repair work was invisible to most people. Even experienced collectors rarely notice such subtle restoration. But she'd spotted it immediately, like she knew exactly what to look for. "Natural fissures," I said, keeping my voice steady. "Carrara marble sometimes develops internal stress fractures during transport. Part of the restoration process is stabilizing the stone structure." She nodded slowly, her manicured fingers still tracing the repair line. "Your reputation for meticulous work is well-deserved, Buck. The Foundation specifically requested you because of your attention to detail." Something in her tone made my skin crawl. The way she said attention to detail sounded like she was talking about something else entirely. I wiped my hands on the shop rag, buying time to study her expression. "I take pride in preserving the original integrity," I replied carefully. "Of course you do." Her smile widened, but it never reached her eyes. "That's what makes you so valuable." The workshop felt smaller suddenly, the familiar space charged with tension I couldn't quite identify. Rachel continued her inspection, moving with predatory grace around each sculpture. She paused at the second piece, where I drilled the extraction hole that morning. "This marble quality is exceptional," she said, running her palm across the surface. "Much denser than typical Carrara, almost like it was specially selected for durability." My mouth went dry. She was describing the exact characteristics that would make these sculptures perfect for concealing electronic devices. The dense marble would shield the transponders from casual detection while allowing radio signals to transmit. "The stone does have unusual density patterns," I admitted, watching her reaction. Rachel's eyes met mine directly for the first time since she'd arrived. The polite patron mask slipped just enough to reveal something calculating underneath. "I assume you've been thorough in your examination," she said, her cultured voice taking on a harder edge. "These pieces have been in my family's collection for decades. Every feature has sentimental value." The words hit me like cold water. She wasn't just aware of the surveillance devices, she was the one who'd put them there. The wealthy patron who'd commissioned my restoration work, who'd praised my integrity and craftsmanship, was the architect of this entire operation. My hands trembled slightly as I set down the shop rag. "I've documented everything according to standard restoration protocols." "I'm sure you have." She moved closer, close enough that I could smell her expensive perfume mixing with the stone dust. "You're known for your comprehensive approach to documentation." The threat was subtle but unmistakable. She knew I'd found the transponders, knew I'd extracted them, and she was standing in my workshop, calmly discussing it like we were negotiating a contract modification. The sound of Frank's truck door slamming echoed across the parking lot. Rachel's expression immediately smoothed back into polite interest. The transformation so quick it was unsettling. Frank walked through the bay door carrying a metal case of testing equipment, his engineer's eyes immediately picking up on the charged atmosphere. He stopped short, glancing between Rachel and me. "Frank, this is Ms. Torres, the patron I mentioned," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "Ms. Torres, Frank Castellano. He's been helping with some technical analysis." Frank nodded politely, but I caught the way his gaze sharpened as he assessed the situation. 20 years in electronics had given him good instincts for when circuits were about to overload. "Mr. Castellano," Rachel said smoothly, extending her hand, "Buck speaks very highly of your expertise. I understand you've been assisting with the restoration assessment." "Just providing some technical consultation," Frank replied carefully, "making sure the stone integrity meets gallery standards." Rachel's smile remained perfectly calibrated. "How thorough! The Foundation appreciates such comprehensive evaluation." She glanced at her watch, a gesture so practiced it felt rehearsed. "I'm afraid I have a board meeting at the gallery, but I wanted to check on your progress personally." She moved toward the door, then paused, her hand resting on the doorframe. "I trust you'll handle the restoration with your usual discretion, Buck. These pieces are quite special to our Foundation. We'd hate for any misunderstandings." to affect their presentation. The words carried unmistakable weight. Not a request, a warning. I watched her Mercedes disappear down the access road, my pulse hammering against my collar. Frank set down his equipment case and looked at me seriously. "That woman just threatened you without saying a word," he said quietly. I nodded, my mind racing through the implications. Rachel Torres knew I'd discovered the transponders, knew I'd documented evidence, and yet she'd let me walk away. The question was, why? "Frank, we need to call Elena Vasquez." Tonight. The workshop suddenly felt exposed, vulnerable. Every shadow could hide another surveillance device. Every sound could be monitored. The woman I'd trusted with my reputation had just revealed herself as the enemy, and I was holding evidence that could destroy her entire operation. Frank and I stood in the aftermath of Rachel's visit, the workshop feeling different now, contaminated somehow. The 3 extracted transponders sat on my workbench like evidence of my own stupidity. 27 years of stonework, and I'd been played like a rookie. "We need to spread this out," I said, gesturing toward Frank's laptop bag. "All of it." Frank nodded, his weathered hands already pulling cables and hard drives from his equipment case. "The GPS data is just the beginning, Buck. These devices were logging everything. Audio signatures, movement patterns, even ambient conversations within a 30-foot radius." I cleared my main work surface, pushing aside chisels and calipers to make room for Frank's electronics. The familiar weight of my tools felt foreign now, tainted by the knowledge of what they'd helped create. Frank's laptop hummed to life, casting blue light across stone dust that never quite settled in this place. His fingers moved across the keyboard with the precision I usually reserved for carving delicate details. "Here," he said, pulling up a data stream that made my stomach drop. Transmission logs going back 14 months. The screen filled with timestamps and coordinates, each entry representing a moment when my restored sculptures had betrayed someone's privacy. I leaned closer, squinting at the numbers. "These aren't random." "Exactly." Frank highlighted clusters of activity. "Look at these spikes. They correlate perfectly with gallery events. Opening nights, donor meetings, private viewings." He scrolled through weeks of data, each pattern more damning than the last. "Your sculptures weren't just surveillance devices, Buck. They were intelligence-gathering stations." My hands started to shake as the scope hit me. "How many people?" Frank's face went grim as he pulled up another file. "According to the logs, 847 unique signals over 12 years. Rachel Torres has been running a surveillance operation that would make the NSA jealous." The workshop suddenly felt smaller, the familiar walls pressing in like a vice. I'd spent decades in this space, finding peace in the honest work of stone and mortar. Now it felt like a crime scene. "Show me the money," I said, my voice rougher than I intended. Frank's fingers danced across keys, pulling up financial records that made my head spin. "Shell companies," he explained, highlighting transfers between accounts I'd never heard of. "Meridian Cultural Foundation routes everything through offshore networks. Look at this, 4.7 million in suspicious transactions over the past 5 years. The numbers swam before my eyes. Art market manipulation, insider trading, information brokerage, all funded by surveillance data gathered through my craftsmanship. Jesus Christ. It gets worse. Frank overlaid the gallery floor plan with GPS coordinates from the sculptures. The pattern that emerged made my chest tight. Each piece strategically positioned to monitor private alcoves where donors conducted business, acoustic dead spots where secrets were shared, conversation zones where million-dollar deals were whispered. I stared at the screen, seeing how Rachel Torres had turned my restoration work into weapons of espionage. Every careful measurement, every precise placement, I'd been her unwitting accomplice for over a year. "Buck," Frank's voice cut through my spiral. "Your phone's buzzing. Unknown number." I almost let it go to voicemail, but something made me answer. "Reed. Mr. Reed." Rachel Torres's cultured voice filled the workshop, smooth as polished marble and twice as cold. "I believe we need to discuss your recent discoveries." Frank froze at his laptop, data still streaming across the screen. I could feel my pulse in my temples. "The Whitmore Gallery," Rachel continued, each word precisely enunciated. "1 hour. Come alone and bring your tools. We have some restoration work to discuss. The line went dead before I could respond. I stared at my phone while Frank's worried eyes reflected the laptop's glow. "You're not going," Frank said. "Like hell I'm not." I was already reaching for my tool bag, muscle memory taking over. "She wants to meet? Fine. But I'm bringing evidence of what she's done." "Buck, think about this." "I am thinking." I grabbed the 3 transponders, their titanium casings cold against my palm. "She turned my work into a lie. Made me complicit in violating hundreds of people's privacy. That ends tonight." Frank started shutting down his equipment. "Then I'm coming with you," she said alone. "And you trust her?" Frank's laugh held no humor. "Buck, this woman's been running a surveillance operation for over a decade. You think she's going to play fair now that you've blown her cover?" I hefted my tool bag, feeling the familiar weight of hammers and chisels. Tools that had shaped stone for nearly 3 decades, now evidence of my unwitting betrayal. Maybe not, but I'm done being played. The workshop felt different as we prepared to leave, no longer my sanctuary, but a place where artistic integrity had been corrupted by modern deception. Stone dust hung in the air like accusations, and the late afternoon light filtering through high windows seemed harsh, unforgiving. 1 hour, I repeated, checking my watch. Time to face what I helped create. The Whitmore Gallery's marble entrance felt like walking into a mausoleum. My footsteps echoed off polished floors as I pushed through the heavy glass doors, tool bag weighing on my shoulder like guilt. The security guard barely glanced up from his newspaper, probably used to after-hours appointments with Rachel Torres. I found her in the main exhibition hall, standing beside my restored altarpiece like she owned it, which I realized with a sick twist in my gut, she probably did. The contracts were already spread across the marble surface, thick legal documents with Heritage Stoneworks letterhead. "Mr. Reed," her voice carried that same cultured precision, but something had shifted. The polite patron mask was slipping. "I trust you've had time to consider our conversation." I set my tool bag down hard enough to make the marble ring. The 3 transponders clinked against my chisels. I've had time to think about a lot of things. Rachel's fingers traced the edge of the nearest contract. $500,000 in restoration work over the next 18 months. The Cathedral of St. Augustine needs their rose window stabilized. The Maritime Museum wants their entry portico restored to original specifications. Her smile was sharp as cut glass. "All you have to do is forget what you found. Your acoustic testing was inconclusive." The irony burned like acid in my throat. She was using my own work as a negotiating table, my restored altarpiece as a prop in her corruption theater. I thought of Carlos Delgado's ruined lungs, of Vincent Moreau's falsified safety records, of how silence enables the powerful to destroy the powerless. Some things aren't for sale. My voice echoed off the stone walls, harder than the marble beneath our feet. Rachel's smile turned predatory. How unfortunate. She produced her phone with the casual grace of someone drawing a weapon. The screen lit up with contacts, messages, power concentrated in digital form. Heritage Stoneworks will lose several major contracts by morning. The university's chapel restoration? Canceled due to safety concerns. The courthouse renovation? Delayed pending investigation of your certifications. My chest tightened as she scrolled through what looked like a hit list. OSHA will receive anonymous tips about safety violations at your current projects. Detailed reports about inadequate dust protection, expired respirators, falsified training records. Her eyes met mine over the phone's glow. All true, of course, but selectively reported. The gallery's elegant atmosphere turned suffocated. High ceilings that should have felt spacious, now pressed down like a tomb. Your nephew Tommy's apprenticeship depends on Heritage Stoneworks maintaining their contractor license. Your wife Diana's bookkeeping clients, half of them connected to construction firms that value discretion over whistleblowers. I backed away from the altar, from the contracts, from her. The scope of her reach was becoming clear. Threads of influence woven through every aspect of my professional life. She followed, her heels clicking against marble like a countdown. 12 years of careful cultivation, Mr. Reed. Her voice dropped to a whisper that somehow carried perfectly in the gallery's acoustic dead space. Senators, judges, business leaders, all monitored through your beautiful stonework. Every private conversation in gallery alcoves, every whispered deal in museum corridors, every secret shared in the shadow of your restored masterpieces. Gallery shadows seemed to press closer as the true scope hit me. This wasn't just about 3 sculptures. You think you're protecting artistic integrity? You're destroying a system that maintains social order. Information properly managed prevents chaos. My workshop training kicked in. Sometimes you have to break stone completely before you can reshape it into something stronger. Rachel produced a second phone, this one showing live surveillance feeds. Multiple screens, different locations, but I recognize my work in each frame. Your discovery threatens more than you understand. The Metropolitan Museum's Byzantine collection, your restoration work there houses monitoring equipment in 7 pieces. The federal courthouse lobby, those Carrara columns you spent 8 months perfecting, each one contains military-grade listening devices. The gallery's marble floors felt like quicksand beneath my boots. Museums, churches, corporate lobbies, my life's work corrupted and weaponized. Information is power, Mr. Reed. I simply organize its flow to prevent misunderstandings. I study the surveillance feeds with my craftsman's eye, noting the strategic placement in each location. Acoustic sweet spots where sound would carry, structural positions that maximize coverage, artistic arrangements that drew people into monitoring zones. You turned my art into spy equipment. Your acoustic knowledge made perfect cover. Rachel nodded approvingly, like a teacher praising a slow student's breakthrough. Who suspects a stonemason of understanding electronics? Your expertise in sound and vibration made you the ideal unwitting accomplice. Every measurement you took, every structural analysis you performed, you were mapping surveillance opportunities without knowing it. The gallery's silence amplified my realization. Frank Castellano was right. I'd been played from the beginning. But he was also waiting for my return, and Elena Vasquez was ready to publish everything we'd found. My phone buzzed. Text from Frank. Upload complete. Elena has everything. Rachel stepped closer, her final offer hanging in the air like incense from a corrupted altar. Last chance, Mr. Reed. Take the contracts, relocate your family, start fresh in another city. Your skills are valuable. Other galleries, other patrons who appreciate discretion. I looked around at my compromised masterpieces, then at the surveillance tablet showing my neighbors, my community under digital observation. Gallery floor plan overlays revealed how precisely the sculptures had been positioned, monitoring high society networking events, capturing private conversations, turning cultural spaces into intelligence-gathering operations. My lips curved into a grim smile as I realized the trap had already been sprung. Too late. The story's already out there. Rachel's cultured composure finally cracked. What? Elena Vasquez has the transponders, the frequency data, the surveillance network maps? I hefted my tool bag, feeling the familiar weight of honest tools and dishonest circumstances. By morning, every major news outlet will know how you corrupted art to spy on people. The gallery's perfect acoustics carried my words like a funeral bell. And for the first time since I'd met her, Rachel Torres looked genuinely afraid. Rachel's face went white. Not pale white, like marble under fluorescent lights. She stood frozen for maybe 5 seconds, her designer composure cracking like old mortar. "You don't understand what you've done," she whispered. I kept my hands steady on the altarpiece, running my fingers along the restored Gothic tracery. 23 years I'd spent perfecting this technique. Now I knew why she'd really wanted it. I understand perfectly. I turned to face her. "You used my work, my reputation, my craft." She pulled out her phone with shaking hands, started typing something, then stopped, started again. "The contracts I can destroy are worth more than your little workshop," she said, but her voice had lost that cultured authority. "Vincent Moreau owes me favors. Marcus Webb takes my calls. One word from me and Heritage Stoneworks loses every major client." Frank looked up from his laptop. Too late for damage control. Elena's story goes live in 30 minutes. Rachel's phone buzzed. She glanced at the screen and I watched something die in her eyes. "That's my editor," Elena said, checking her own phone. "Confirming publication." The workshop felt different now, lighter somehow, like when you finally remove a cracked stone that's been threatening the whole structure. I picked up my smallest chisel and went back to work on the altarpiece's delicate leaf pattern. 12 years, Rachel said quietly. Do you know how many senators, judges, business leaders I monitored? The conversations I recorded? The deals I documented? Don't care. The federal courthouse renovation. Your stonework there recorded 3 Supreme Court justices discussing pending cases. The Metropolitan Museum project captured insider trading discussions worth millions. You enabled all of it. My chisel slipped. Just a fraction, but enough to nick the limestone. I'd have to sand that smooth later. I restored stone. You corrupted it. Rachel walked to the workbench where the GPS chips lay scattered like electronic evidence. She picked up one of the titanium casings, rolling it between her manicured fingers. This technology costs $4 million to develop. Custom battery chemistry, satellite encryption, acoustic dampening. I hired the best engineers in the defense industry. Should have hired better lawyers. She laughed, sharp, bitter. My lawyers are excellent. They're also among the people I've been monitoring for 12 years. Frank's laptop chimed with an incoming message. Elena, your editor wants confirmation on the source documents. I'm sending the frequency analysis and location data now. Wait, Rachel's voice cracked. Please, just wait. Elena paused her typing. Why? Because you don't understand the scope. This isn't just about surveillance. The information I gathered, it prevented 3 terrorist attacks, stopped 2 assassination attempts, exposed a human trafficking ring operating through art auctions. I set down my chisel. That's not your call to make. Whose call is it? The FBI who couldn't infiltrate these circles? The CIA who can't get close to foreign diplomats at gallery openings? I created a national security asset. You created a criminal enterprise. She was quiet for a long moment, just standing there holding the GPS chip. When she spoke again, her voice was different, smaller. My father was a stonemason. Did you know that? Worked on the Lincoln Memorial restoration in 1989. Came home every night covered in marble dust, proud of his craft. I stopped working. Something in her tone made me look up. He would have hated what I became. Diana stepped forward from where she'd been standing by the door. It's not too late to... Yes, it is. Rachel placed the GPS chip back on the workbench with careful precision. The moment Mr. Reed uploaded that evidence, it became too late. My phone buzzed. Text message from an unknown number. Your family's safety depends on your discretion. 847 powerful people don't like being exposed. I showed the screen to Frank. He grimaced. Rachel, I said quietly, call off your people. They're not my people anymore. When Elena's story breaks, I lose control of everything. The surveillance network, the blackmail files, the protection protocols, it all fragments, becomes chaos. Elena's fingers flew across her laptop keyboard. Story's live in 15 minutes. Buck, we need to get you and your family somewhere safe. This is my workshop. I'm not running. Rachel walked to the window overlooking the industrial district. Late afternoon sun cast long shadows through the glass, illuminating the stone dust floating in the air like microscopic snow. Your altarpiece is beautiful, she said without turning around. Perfect restoration of 14th century Gothic stonework, museum quality. Thanks. I genuinely admire your craftsmanship. That's what makes this so tragic. She turned back to face me, and for a moment, she looked like a different person. Older, tired. I need to make some calls. Damage control. Try to prevent the worst of what's coming. She paused at the door. Mr. Reed, your father would have been proud of your integrity. The door closed behind her with a soft click. Frank was already packing his equipment. We should assume your workshop is compromised. Probably has been for months. Elena saved her files to multiple cloud servers. Buck, the story's going to create a firestorm. Federal investigations, congressional hearings, international incidents. You ready for that? I picked up my chisel and went back to work on the altarpiece. The limestone felt solid under my hands. Honest, predictable. Stone doesn't lie, I said. Neither do I. That'll have to be enough. Diana's phone rang again. 4th time in 10 minutes. She glanced at the screen and shook her head. Marcus Webb. He's persistent. Let it ring, I said, running my thumb along the chisel edge. Still sharp enough to shave with. Good steel holds its edge when you treat it right. Elena packed her camera equipment with practiced efficiency. Story goes live at 6 a.m. tomorrow. Front page of the Herald, plus digital distribution to our syndicate partners. She paused, looking at me directly. Buck, this is going to be national news within hours. You ready for that? I set the chisel down and picked up my hammer. The limestone gargoyle's face was emerging from the block, patient features that had waited centuries to see daylight again. Stone doesn't care about headlines, but people do. Diana finally answered her phone. Marcus? Yes, he's here. No, he's not available for... What? Her face went pale. I see. Yes, I'll tell him. She hung up and looked at me with that expression she gets when the numbers don't add up right. Heritage Stoneworks is terminating all your contracts, effective immediately. Frank looked up from his equipment. How much work? $180,000, Diana said quietly. The cathedral restoration, the courthouse project, 3 private commissions. She sat down heavily on my work stool. That's most of our income for the next year. I kept working the limestone. Each strike of the chisel removed another layer of accumulated grime, revealing the original carver's intention underneath. The gargoyle's eyes were starting to show character, protective, watchful. Good stone endures, I said, regardless of who owns it. Tommy burst through the workshop door, his work boots clattering on the concrete floor. Uncle Buck! Diana! I saw Elena's van outside and... He stopped, noticing the tension in the room. What's wrong? Nothing that won't work itself out, I told him. You ready for your lesson? The kid nodded eagerly. At 17, he had the enthusiasm I remembered from my own apprenticeship days. Still believed that honest work would always find its reward. Elena shouldered her equipment bag. I'll send you copies of the interview footage. Might be useful for the documentary crew that'll probably show up next week. Documentary? Buck, you just exposed a 12-year surveillance operation that monitored senators, federal judges, and Fortune 500 CEOs. This story has legs. She paused at the door. You sure you're ready for what's coming? I guided Tommy to the limestone block, showing him the proper angle for the restoration work. See how the original carver followed the natural grain? Never fought against the stone's character? Tommy nodded, picking up his apprentice chisel with the careful reverence I'd taught him. The workshop settled back into its natural rhythm, the soft percussion of steel on stone, the whisper of dust settling, the afternoon light slanting through high windows. Frank finished downloading the GPS data onto encrypted drives. 847 unique signals over 12 years, he muttered, studying the patterns on his screen. She knew where everyone went, who they talked to, how long they stayed. He looked up at me. Rachel Torres had the most powerful people in the country under surveillance. Had, Diana corrected. Past tense. My phone buzzed. Text message from Vincent Moreau. Call me immediately. We need damage control. I deleted the message without reading it twice. The limestone was responding well to Tommy's careful work. His technique had improved significantly over the past months. Less force, more precision. Understanding that the stone wanted to reveal its secrets, not have them beaten out of it. Uncle Buck? Tommy paused in his chiseling. Are we in trouble? Depends on how you define trouble. I tested another section of the gargoyle's wing with my probe. We lost some contracts, might lose more. But the work itself? That's still here. Diana was already running calculations on her tablet, her bookkeeper's mind automatically shifting into survival mode. Our savings can carry us for maybe 4 months. After that, she shrugged. After that, we adapt. I showed Tommy how to work around a natural flaw in the limestone, incorporating the stone's imperfection into the restoration rather than trying to hide it. Good craftsmen find a way. The workshop phone rang. Diana answered it with her professional voice, the one she used for difficult clients. Heritage Stoneworks, this is Diana. Yes, he's here, but he's not taking interviews today. No comment. Thank you. She hung up and sighed. Channel 7 News. Want to do a live interview about the surveillance scandal? They can wait, I said. Elena's story would break tomorrow morning. By noon, every news outlet in the country would be running some version of the surveillance network expose. Rachel Torres would become a household name, and not in a good way. Federal investigations would follow, congressional hearings, international incidents if any foreign nationals were monitored, and Heritage Stoneworks would be known as the shop where it all started. Tommy was making good progress on the gargoyle's wing. His chisel work had developed the patient rhythm that separated real craftsmen from amateurs. Steady, methodical, respectful of the stone's natural character. The old masters didn't cut corners, I told him, because they knew corners hold everything together. He nodded seriously, the way young people do when they're trying to absorb wisdom they don't fully understand yet. Frank packed up his electronics equipment. Buck, you should assume your workshop has been under surveillance for months, maybe years. Rachel's people probably have recordings of every conversation, every client meeting. Let them. I stepped back to examine Tommy's progress. The gargoyle's protective expression was emerging beautifully from the limestone. Patient features that would outlast whatever storms were coming. Stone doesn't lie. Neither do we. Diana's tablet chimed with an email notification. She glanced at it and frowned. OSHA inspection scheduled for next week. Vincent Moreau's shop. She looked at me meaningfully. Sounds like the dominoes are starting to fall. The late afternoon sun slanted through the workshop windows, illuminating floating stone dust like golden snow. Somewhere across town, Rachel Torres was probably making desperate phone calls, trying to contain a scandal that had already metastasized beyond her control. But here in the workshop, the work continued as it always had, as it always would. Tommy set down his chisel and stepped back to admire his progress. It's starting to look like something. It always was something, I corrected gently. We're just helping it remember what it was meant to be.